Indeed, it is less than nothing, and I have seen, when the great soul of the world turned over with a heavy sigh, a perfectly new, extra stout foresail vanish like a bit of some airy stuff much lighter than gossamer. Then was the time for the tall spars to stand fast in the great uproar. The machinery must do its work, even if the soul of the world has gone mad. The modern steamship advances upon a still and overshadowed sea with a pulsating tremor of her frame, an occasional clang in her depths, as if she had an iron heart in her iron body, with a thudding rhythm in her progress, and the regular beat of her propeller, heard afar in the night with an august and plodding sound, as of the march of an inevitable future. But in a gale, the silent machinery of a sailing ship would catch not only the power, but the wild and exulting voice of the world's soul. Whether she ran with her tall spars swinging, or breasted it with her tall spars lying over, there was always that wild song, deep like a chant, for a bass to the shrill pipe of the wind played on the sea-tops, with a punctuating crash, now and then, of a breaking wave. At times the weird effects of that invisible orchestra would get upon a man's nerves till he wished himself deaf. And this recollection of a personal wish, experienced upon several oceans, where the soul of the world has plenty of room to turn over with a mighty sigh, brings me to the remark that in order to take a proper care of a ship's spars, it is just as well for a seaman to have nothing the matter with his ears. Such is the intimacy with which a seaman had to live with his ship of yesterday, that his senses were like her senses, that the stress upon his body made him judge of the strain upon the ship's masts. I had been some time at sea before I became aware of the fact that hearing plays a perceptible part in gauging the force of the wind. It was at night. The ship was one of those iron wool clippers that the Clyde had floated out in swarms upon the world during the 7th decade of the last century. It was a fine period in shipbuilding, and also, I might say, a period of overmasting. The spars rigged up on the narrow hulls were indeed tall then, and the ship of which I think, with her coloured glass skylight ends, bearing the motto, "Let Glasgow Flourish," was certainly one of the most heavily sparred specimens. She was built for hard driving, and unquestionably she got all the driving she could stand. Our captain was a man famous for the quick passages he had been used to make in the old Tweed, a ship famous the world over for her speed. The Tweed had been a wooden vessel, and he had brought the tradition of quick passages with him into the iron clipper. I was the junior in her, a third mate, keeping watch with the chief officer, and it was just during one of the night watches in a strong freshening breeze that I overheard two men in a sheltered nook of the main deck exchanging these informing remarks. Said one, "Should think 'twas time some of them light sails were coming off her," and the other, an older man, uttered grumpily, "No fear, not while the chief mate's on deck. He's that deaf he can't tell how much wind there is." And indeed poor P, quite young and a smart seaman, was very hard of hearing. At the same time he had the name of being the very devil of a fellow for carrying on sail on a ship. He was wonderfully clever at concealing his deafness, and as to carrying on heavily, though he was a fearless man, I don't think he ever meant to take undue risks. I can never forget his naive sort of astonishment when remonstrated with for what appeared a most daredevil performance. The only person, of course, that could remonstrate with telling effect was our captain, himself a man of daredevil tradition, and really, for me, who knew under whom I was serving, those were impressive scenes. Captain S had a great name for sailor-like qualities, the sort of name that compelled my youthful admiration. To this day I preserve his memory, for indeed it was he, in a sense, who completed my training. It was often a stormy process, but let that pass. I am sure he meant well, and I am certain that never, not even at the time, could I bear him malice for his extraordinary gift of incisive criticism. And to hear him make a fuss about too much sail on the ship, seemed one of those incredible experiences that take place only in one's dreams. It generally happened in this way: night, clouds racing overhead, wind howling, royals set, and the ship rushing on in the dark, an immense white sheet of foam level with the lee rail. Mr. P, in charge of the deck, hooked onto the windward mizzen rigging in a state of perfect serenity. Myself, the third mate, also hooked on somewhere to the windward of the slanting poop, in a state of the utmost preparedness to jump at the very first hint of some sort of order, but otherwise in a perfectly acquiescent state of mind. Suddenly out of the companion would appear a tall, dark figure, bare-headed, with a short white beard of a perpendicular cut, very visible in the dark. Captain S, disturbed in his reading down below by the frightful bounding and lurching of the ship. Leaning very much against the precipitous incline of the deck, he would take a turn or two, perfectly silent, hang on by the compass for a while, take another couple of turns, and suddenly burst out, "What are you trying to do with the ship?" And Mr. P, who was not good at catching what was shouted in the wind, would say interrogatively, "Yes, sir?" Then, in the increasing gale of the sea, there would be a little private ship storm going on, in which you could detect strong language, pronounced in a tone of passion and exculpatory protestations, uttered with every possible inflection of injured innocence. "By heavens, Mr. P, I used to carry on sail in my time, but—" and the rest would be lost to me in a stormy gust of wind. Then in a lull, P's protesting innocence would become audible. "She seems to stand it very well." And then another burst of an indignant voice, "Any fool can carry sail on a ship." And so on and so on. The ship meanwhile rushing on her way with a heavier list, a noisier splutter, a more threatening hiss of the white, almost blinding sheet of foam, to leeward. For the best of it was that Captain S seemed constitutionally incapable of giving his officers a definite order to shorten sail, and so that extraordinarily vague row would go on till at last it dawned upon them both, in some particularly alarming gust, that it was time to do something. There is nothing like the fearful inclination of your tall spars overloaded with canvas to bring a deaf man and an angry one to their senses.